In a small town in Ohio, there was a one-story house with a neat front garden. The landscape behind him went towards the river, and somewhere in the distance fields could be seen. Emma and Jake had lived in this house for several years, a married couple whose life together was considered by many neighbors to be exemplary calm. However, behind the white picket fence gates were hidden experiences and emotions that even those closest to her had no idea about. On this Saturday evening, as usual, they sat at a simple wooden table in the kitchen. The warm light of the lamp fell on plates of chicken breasts and fresh salad. There was no luxury here, but there was comfort. A sparkling clean stove, an old-fashioned but polished cupboard, a small vase with wildflowers. Emma always loved decorating the house with such little things. She thought it gave the atmosphere a special warmth. But today the expression on her face betrayed fatigue. She held the fork in her hand and slowly stirred the salad, as if she could not decide to start eating. "Hard day?" Jake asked quietly, so as not to scare her with a sudden question. He had a soft, calm voice. He always knew how to speak in such a way that even the most painful topics sounded with a touch of participation and sympathy. "Yes," Emma answered, leaning her elbows on the table. "I'm stuck at work. I have to take extra hours. I promised my boss that I would do everything to the highest standard, but sometimes I feel like I'm driving myself into a dead end." She carefully straightened the brown strands that had escaped from her ponytail. Over the past year, she began to wear makeup less often, preferring naturalness, although she still liked to highlight her eyes a little. Emma didn't have the looks of a model, but she had an inner strength and grace that captivated people. This is exactly what struck Jake when they met during their student internship. Now he looked at her and noticed how fatigue appeared in this strength. "Maybe it makes sense to look for an easier job option," he suggested. "Remember when you talked about trying yourself in a small consulting firm or in a charitable organization?" He said this, trying not to betray his own anxiety. Deep down, he was uncomfortable admitting that he himself could not provide for his family. Due to a back injury and constant pain, Jake was officially disabled. He received a pension paid by the state, but this money was barely enough for basic needs. Emma carried their daily life almost single-handedly, facing enormous stress and, as Jake understood, disappointment. She sighed, looking at him with sad tenderness. "You see, I now work for a real estate company. I finally have a chance to grow into a leading specialist if I complete several large projects. If I quit, I risk being left with nothing. But we need money, your medicine, my courses, and the bills are growing." Jake fell silent. He hated this feeling of his own uselessness, which was creeping up on him more and more often when it came to money. In college, he was a promising athlete. He played American football well and dreamed of becoming a coach and leading clubs for children. The injury ruined all his plans, and now he counted the days when the pain was bearable and tried to help at least a little around the house. "You are not left with nothing. You have me," he said quietly, and then I realized how helpless his words sounded. Emma, as if sensing his remorse, reached out to his hand and squeezed it. "Yes, I know," she smiled, but there was fatigue in her voice. "I'm just afraid that we'll get stuck in this routine. We once dreamed of traveling, helping other people, but now." She didn't finish. "Tomorrow did not bring much joyful expectations. All that stood before my eyes was work again, stress again, again the support of my husband, which helped morally, but did not relieve financial problems." A little later, they moved into the living room. There on the shelf hung old photographs of their wedding day when she wore a simple but elegant white dress, and he wore a classic suit with a boutonniere in his lapel. In another photo, they were smiling in front of a national park. Then Jake was healthy, and his whole life seemed ahead of him. There were also general photos with friends, hikes, barbecues, student parties. Looking into these happy faces, Emma felt her heart squeezing. Those times seemed so far away. Jake turned off the TV, which was flickering with some evening show, and turned to his wife. "Do you want to watch our favorite movie? There are a couple of classic comedies that always amused us. Remember Ocean's 11? This was the first movie we went to the cinema together. Or maybe something else." He knew she loved those movies about cunning plans and heists, even though that was a long time ago. But Emma shook her head. I would like to go to bed early. In the morning, you need to get up before dawn. Quietly shrugging his shoulders, Jake did not insist. He also felt tired not so much physically as mentally from the realization that their life had reached a dead end. From the outside, their house seemed filled with love and harmony. But in fact, something began to crack. Emma felt more and more dissatisfied, and Jake felt that he was unable to give his wife what she was so eager for. And perhaps this difference in needs will someday become a real abyss. Before going to bed, Emma lay for a long time with her eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Outside the window, there was the noise of passing cars, the neighbors were having some kind of holiday, and the guests were going home. She thought about what they should do next. If Jake could work, she thought, maybe we could get out of debt. I wouldn't have to work so hard to pay all the bills. But the next moment she scolded herself. It's not his fault for his injury, and if I have a chance to advance, I need to take it. So thought after thought, like waves, crashed against her anxiety. Finally, she fell into an uneasy sleep, and Jake, who had been awake for a long time, lay next to her and listened to her quiet, ragged breathing. He saw her hand twitching, as if she was worried about something even in her sleep, and he became scared from the thought that he did not know how to help her. Closer to dawn, he dozed off, but before that he managed to think, I hope we can save everything. At that moment, he did not know how unpredictable the events of the coming weeks would be, how irreparably their lives would change, and what emotional turmoil they would still face. The work week at the Riverside real estate office began with a meeting. Emma entered the glass meeting room, holding a folder with documents and a latte to go from a nearby coffee shop. Everyone already knew her boss, Mrs. Gibson, as a strict but fair lady. She valued employees who were able to both work with clients and diligently do analytics. Emma, sit down. We need to discuss the upcoming project. Mrs. Gibson turned to her, making an inviting gesture with her hand. Two more people from the consulting department were sitting at the table. The third chair was empty. Emma glanced at him for a moment, expecting to see another colleague, but Mrs. Gibson noticed this and explained. An outside consultant will join us. Our new partner is the company represented by Logan Reese. He had helped large construction firms on the East Coast and now became interested in our region. He is not on staff, but will work with us. I recommend that you make friends with him professionally. You have an analytical mind and the ability to negotiate. The name Logan Reese has already appeared in industry news, something like a young, successful specialist in the field of development, rapidly making his career. The press wrote about his aggressive approach to the market and his ability to pull out projects with large investments. Emma felt dual excitement. On the one hand, this is a chance to show herself. On the other, the responsibility is colossal. Half an hour later, when everyone had left, the meeting room doors opened again, and a tall man in an expensive suit appeared on the threshold. He looked about 35 years old. His dark hair was neatly styled, and a watch sparkled on his wrist, which Emma had previously only seen in glossy magazines. He looked at her with a tenacious glance, smiled, and confidently extended his hand. Hello, you must be Emma. Mrs. Gibson said that you will become my main link in the company. She shook his hand, trying to look collected. Right, nice to meet you. I will be involved in analytics and direct coordination of the project. I was appointed curator on our side. Great, he said, holding her palm a little longer than usual. Then he stepped back, smiling. I'm sure we'll have productive work. For the rest of the day, Emma was torn between her usual tasks and new discussions with Logan. He asked specific questions and immediately offered bold solutions, as if testing the reaction. Surprisingly, she felt that she was talking to a person who thinks big, who is not afraid to take risks. Such initiatives rarely came from her former colleagues. By lunchtime, Emma had managed to process a mountain of documents and make several preliminary cost-benefit calculations for the project. They were to be shown to Logan at a meeting in his temporary office, rented in a nearby building. Placing the printouts in front of him, She began to tell. Here are the potential areas for development. We see that the cost of land has jumped by 15% in a year, but with successful cooperation with the municipality, tax breaks can be achieved. Yes, he interrupted softly but confidently. What if we look at neighboring districts where rates are lower? Let's say there are vacant lots further north along the river, and the municipality seems to be more friendly to developers. Emma smiled because she wanted to offer about the same thing, but Logan was one step ahead of her. There was a feeling that he was not just a consultant, but a strategist who was moving forward a few squares. They began to exchange ideas like two partners who had found a common language. At some point, Logan leaned back in his chair and, looking directly at Emma, said, "And yet you are not one of those who likes to sit still. I see from your reports that you know how to go beyond templates." "Thank you," she replied, trying to hide the surge of pride. "I just think that if we want to achieve serious results, we need to work proactively." It didn't escape his gaze how her eyes lit up when she talked about the prospects. A slight smile touched his lips, the smile of a man who was used to getting what he wanted. He leaned forward. "You know, I am always impressed by people who are not afraid to think globally. Tell me, why haven't you moved somewhere higher yet? For example, to a large company to reach a more serious level?" Emma froze for a moment, turning this question over in her head. Why? Indeed, she once dreamed of great success, almost of her own business, but life turned out differently. Marriage, financial difficulties, uncertainty. It was too personal to answer this directly, so she limited herself to a neutral phrase. "There is still room for growth here. But your question makes me think." They talked more about the project and discussed a possible schedule. Logan made an appointment for the end of the week, and as he said goodbye, he added, "I'm sure we'll work well together, Emma. You have a lot of potential. Don't let anyone, including yourself, keep it locked away." Her heart trembled at these words. They contained a call to courage, to decisive action. What if he's right? A thought flashed. Maybe it's really time to count on something more than the usual rut. She arrived home in the evening, but did not tell Jake the details, although he asked how the day went. For some reason, I didn't want to post everything, as if it was her personal secret achievement. She just limited herself to saying, "Yes, okay, there is a new project I'll have to try." Inside, she was filled with an unusual feeling of inspiration, as if a dim but promising ray of light had suddenly appeared in her life, promising to change everything around her. But whether it was just career considerations behind this, she herself did not yet understand. Lying in bed, Emma could not fall asleep for a long time, remembering Logan's look, his confident tone. She wondered, is there really a world where people don't count every penny, don't deny themselves new things, and don't live in fear that they won't be able to pay their bills tomorrow? The pictures she had seen in magazines and advertisements, women living in beautiful apartments, traveling the world, dressed in stylish outfits, now came to life somewhere nearby. But then she remembered Jake, his quiet voice and sad smile when he tried to cheer her up. She felt ashamed at the very thought that she wanted something more than modest happiness in their cramped house on the outskirts. In the end, she closed her eyes, convincing herself that she was just tired and that overexertion was to blame. But a temptation had already arisen inside her, which she had yet to face. On Friday after work, Emma met her best friend Sarah at the cozy Brewbeans coffee shop, a small place with brick walls and vintage coffee-themed posters. They had loved coming here since their student days, when they would share half a sandwich and giggle at the fun of their youth. Sarah had a straightforward character and knew how to notice changes in Emma's mood. Therefore, as soon as her friend sat down opposite her, she instantly caught her excited state. "Judging by your appearance, there is something interesting at work, right?" she asked, raising her eyebrows. "Yes, I was assigned to participate in a new project," Emma answered, not trying to hide her smile. "We will work with an invited consultant. He's quite promising, and it seems to me that I have a chance to prove myself." Sarah, taking a sip of cappuccino, asked, "Is promising more about his project or about himself?" She was always insightful. Emma reacted to this with a slight grin. Both. He is very professional, but he also has charm. You know, like in films about a brilliant entrepreneur. Sarah nodded, but an alarming question flashed across her gaze. So how does Jake react to this? I didn't tell him almost anything, Emma admitted after a pause. It's not that I'm going to hide anything, I don't want to remind him again that he can't work. You know, we have a difficult situation with money, and there is no need to load it with all sorts of details. Sarah put the cup on the table and thoughtfully stirred the spoon in the foam. Be careful, friend. Of course, I'm not implying that you are capable of stupid things, but we are all human, especially when we feel that we can achieve something more and we have something to prove. Emma frowned. No, I'm not going to cheat on him or anything like that. It's just, I want a better life, Sarah. I'm tired of seeing how we barely make ends meet. I dream of going on trips, buying good things, not counting every penny before going to the supermarket. Sarah straightened up and looked at her friend sympathetically. We all want more one way or another. But there are things more important than money: love, support, respect. If the race for wealth takes away these values from you, will you be happy? Her questions, as always, hit the mark. Emma initially wanted to answer, "Of course I love Jake." But then I thought, does she really appreciate what she has, or has she been looking at life through the prism of, could it be better, for a long time? However, she tried to shift the conversation to another topic. She told me that the weekend was ahead, but even that would have to be devoted to reports. Sarah took the hint and did not continue the discussion, although the anxiety in her eyes did not disappear. Instead, she suggested meeting on Sunday for a run in the city park. Once upon a time, both were fond of jogging in the morning, and this brought them together since their student days. I'll try to find time, Emma promised, secretly aware that she would most likely find an excuse. Her passion for jogging had faded, and she couldn't afford to waste time on such trifles now she had important meetings with Logan ahead. When Emma left the coffee shop, the street lights were already on at dusk, and passers-by were flashing on the sidewalk. She took out her phone and saw a message from Jake. Will you be late? Should I cook dinner or order pizza? It seemed like a harmless question, but a wave of irritation suddenly rose inside her. Well, how long can you think about housekeeping and saving all the time? Maybe I want something else. Immediately, she reproached herself for such thoughts, but the diffused internal discomfort remained. That evening, she found Jake at home, watching a sports channel in hopes of distracting himself. He smiled at her, but noticed that she was lost in thought. Is Sarah still the same? He asked when he saw Emma come from the coffee shop. How is she doing? Yes, it's fine, Emma responded. Everything is as usual. There was an awkward pause between them. Previously, she would have happily recounted her conversation with Sarah, sharing jokes and gossip. But now she only said a couple of general phrases and went to the bathroom, citing fatigue. A strange feeling flashed through Jake's heart, as if he was losing some contact with his wife. However, he suppressed this feeling, deciding that there was no need to panic. Meanwhile, Emma stood in front of the bathroom mirror and looked at herself carefully. The light caught her reflection, tired eyes, a slightly haggard face. But I'm still young, she thought. I'm only 30, why do I feel like I'm 40? Logan's recent words about not burying yourself in everyday life came to mind. She tried to mentally push away this thought and returned to the bedroom, where Jake was already falling asleep, turning off the TV. The night passed restlessly. Emma woke up several times. She had strange dreams. She was running along the corridors of the office, trying to find a way out, and figures appeared around every corner, either Jake, Logan, or her bosses. And in every dream, for some reason, she was alone, without any support. In the morning, she got up exhausted, but made herself a cup of strong coffee and, without delay, went to work. There was anxiety in her soul, mixed with expectation. Today, there was a new meeting with Logan, and Emma felt that she was waiting for her with that excitement that was not characteristic of her before. It was Wednesday on the calendar. This morning, Emma received an email from Logan. Need to discuss details with a client, let's meet for dinner. He added the clarification that the client prefers informal meetings. For Emma, this sounded like a chance to expand her professional contacts as she dreamed of being noticed by higher-ups in the real estate world. Dinner today? Emma was surprised, looking thoughtfully at the monitor. She didn't often have dinner with clients outside of the office. Such meetings were usually held during the day. But Logan explained that the client had a very busy schedule, and the only opportunity was in the evening. She decided to agree, knowing that such steps could play a decisive role in the project. The whole day was spent in a hurry. It was necessary to put together a presentation and work out the numbers. Emma only had time to grab lunch and then ran out of the office a little after 7 in the evening. Logan sent the address of a restaurant in the city center, a place known for its cuisine and luxurious interior. Feeling slightly nervous, she quickly straightened her hair and took a neat jacket out of the car. She still looked a little tired, but the business suit should have given her confidence. When Emma entered the restaurant, she was greeted by the hostess, who immediately pointed to a table by the window where Logan was already sitting. He smiled friendly at her appearance and stood up to greet her. Outwardly, everything looked impeccably professional, but the client was not visible. "Has our guest arrived yet?" Emma asked, taking off her jacket and carefully hanging it on the back of the chair. "It seems his flight is delayed," Logan explained, glancing at his phone with a frown. "He sent a message that he might not make it in time. But I thought we could have a glass of wine and calmly discuss the details. I hope you don't mind." Emma shrugged. For a second, she thought it was strange to be invited to dinner without a client, but she decided not to make a big deal. When ordering wine, she only asked for a glass of white Riesling and said that she could not sit for long. However, time passed and the client never showed up. Logan, putting down the phone, dryly remarked, "It looks like he'll have to fly back without meeting us. I know this is going to throw off plans, but let's at least enjoy dinner. We still need to discuss the project, right?" They ordered a steak each and began talking about calculations, cooperation schemes, and opportunities to attract investors. Emma found that the more they discussed, the more informal the conversation became. Logan often turned the topic to questions about her personal ambitions, asking what she was planning next in the future for several years. She answered reluctantly, trying to return to the business convoy, but in the end she gave up and said, "Honestly, I see myself as the head of at least a department and perhaps something larger. I want something more than just running errands." "I understand." Logan leaned towards her, his voice sounding low, but bewitching. "And you know what's most interesting? You can totally achieve this. You just need the right push, and people who know how to play at a high level." Emma's heart began to beat faster. How to play at a high level was a phrase that awakened in her a long-dormant feeling. What if I really can make it further? They also ordered coffee and dessert. Emma didn't notice how time flies. The waiters brought dishes and wine, and she continued to talk with Logan. The phone was vibrating somewhere in her pocket, but she didn't check. She decided that it was Jake and that she would answer him later. When the clock already showed about 10, Emma realized that she was late. She quickly glanced at her phone, missed calls from her husband. A feeling of guilt stabbed inside, but she tried to drown it out, telling herself that this was work. Grabbing her purse, she began to say goodbye to Logan. "Thanks for dinner, but I really have to go. I'm sure you'll understand." "Of course," he responded with a soft smile. "Wait, maybe I can give you a ride?" "No, no, I'm in my own car," Emma hastened to refuse. "But thanks again. I think we will continue this conversation in the office." She left the restaurant feeling mixed feelings, a slight excitement from an interesting evening and a gnawing realization that everything looked like some kind of private dinner. Yes, they discussed work, but the atmosphere was far from a strict business format, and she caught herself thinking that she even liked it. On the way home, Emma decided to call Jake to reassure him. Trying to sound cheerful, she said that she stayed for a long time with colleagues and that there was a work meeting. To confirm her words, she turned the surrounding noise into the background so that Jake could hear voices and music from the restaurant. He didn't suspect anything. He just seemed to listen to her explanation and said that he was worried. She promised that she would be home in half an hour. But approaching the house, she realized that her heart was already being consumed by slight remorse. She realized that this whole situation was shrouded in the wrong flare. She was lying to her husband, making up excuses. But nothing like that happened except for a protracted conversation. Why then did she feel inside that she had crossed the line? When Emma entered the house, Jake was sitting on the couch watching TV, but at the sound of the door opening, he turned it off and looked at his wife with obvious concern. "Everything is fine." "Yes," she lied, trying to sound as neutral as possible. "I'm tired. We had a big company at the table. I won't burden you." He wanted to ask for details, but noticed that she looked tense and didn't press further. Emma went into the bedroom, quietly closing the door behind her, and as she kicked off her shoes, she thought, "What would I do if Logan tried to flirt with me? Or worse, surely I wouldn't say a firm no to him on the spot." The thought was frightening, but also strangely exciting. Several days passed after that ill-fated business dinner, and Emma seemed to be walking under an electric current. Thoughts about the conversation with Logan did not leave her. She tried to establish a normal work routine, immersed herself in Excel files, negotiated on the phone, but still the memory of the way he looked at her when he talked about her potential popped into her head. One afternoon, when Emma was about to go home, Logan appeared in the office hallway and invited her. "I have a proposal for new objects that we did not have time to discuss. Maybe at dinner tonight. I don't want to keep you in the office until night, but let's combine business with pleasure." She wanted to refuse. It seemed to her that repeating the same mistake was too risky, but something inside again pushed her to say yes. Jake would most likely be home, and she could report that things had turned upside down again. After all, it's part of the job, right? So she justified herself. They drove to the restaurant in 2 cars. This time, Logan chose not such a pompous steakhouse, but a more intimate fusion restaurant where there is less fuss. Emma still thought it was strictly a business dinner until she noticed that there was no special corporate area on the menu, and the atmosphere was more suitable for romantic meetings. But it was too late to refuse. They ordered a glass of wine, then a second. Conversations about the project gradually alternated with personal topics. He asked where she studied, where she was from, and she unexpectedly opened up, talking about her parents' house in the province, where she and Jake once went on vacation. When the bill was already paid, Logan offered to give her a ride to a car parked a little further away. They went out into the street, where the evening breeze rustled the leaves of the trees, and the noise of cars was heard in the distance. The air was warm, and the street lamps cast a soft glow on the sidewalk. "I'm glad we collaborated so productively today," Logan said, turning to her. "Sometimes it's these informal meetings that help you see what a person really wants." "That's good to hear." Emma felt how everything inside her was shrinking from his attention. She was drawn to him, but she convinced herself that this could not be allowed. "My husband is at home. I shouldn't," she repeated mentally. Suddenly, Logan lightly touched her elbow, pulled her closer, and kissed her without saying a word. For a second, Emma froze, as if not believing what was happening, and then surrendered to this kiss. My heart was pounding somewhere in my throat, and 1,000 thoughts were mixed up in my head. On the one hand, she understood that this was a betrayal. On the other hand, the temptation was stronger. Perhaps she felt wanted for the first time in a long time, felt that someone saw in her an ambitious and attractive woman, and not an eternally tired wife with a burden of responsibilities. When they pulled away, Logan said, "Sorry if I was too impetuous, but it seems that there is something more between us than just a business relationship." Emma sighed heavily, feeling the taste of his lips and misunderstanding in her soul. This is wrong," she whispered, feeling the ground disappear from under her feet. "I have a husband." "I know," he responded calmly, not at all embarrassed. "But you don't look happy. Maybe I'm wrong, but in your eyes I see a thirst for something different. I'm not going to push you. Just know that if you want something more, I'm here." Emma didn't know what to answer. She wanted to run away, but her legs seemed rooted to the spot. After several seconds of internal struggle, she said, I have to go. And let's keep this a secret for now, okay? We still work together. He just nodded, moving a little closer again, as if he wanted to hug. But she recoiled and, turning around, quickly walked towards her car. The heart was beating so loudly that the sound seemed to be heard throughout the entire street. All the way home, she was shaking from adrenaline and the realization of her action. She had cheated on her husband, even if it was just one kiss. But still, the criminal line was crossed. Having parked in front of the house, Emma sat in the car for a long time, trying to control herself. What should we do now? Confess to Jake? This will destroy him. But to lie means to continue to live in a lie. Finally, she left and quietly entered the house. The light was on in the kitchen, and Jake was sitting with a book in his hands. He was rereading some biography of a famous football player. Seeing her, he smiled with relief. Glad you made it. Everything is fine? You're a little pale. Yes, I'm just tired, Emma said, and there was sharpness in her voice. Let's talk tomorrow. Now I don't have the energy to discuss. Jake frowned. It was clear that he wanted to know more, but he realized that Emma was on edge. He sighed hesitantly. Fine. I was also getting ready to go to bed. Emma's heart was literally bursting with guilt. She answered dryly and then went into the bathroom. Locking herself there, she saw her tear-stained face in the mirror. Shoulders were trembling, breathing was labored. She wanted to scream, "What have I done?" But she just ran water into the sink, plunging her hands under the cold stream, trying to calm down. From this moment on, Emma's life seemed to be divided into two parallel realities. In one, she remained Jake's wife, who gets up in the morning, hurriedly makes coffee, washes the dishes, checks that her husband is taking his medications okay, and resolves issues with bills. In another, she turned into an ambitious specialist collaborating with Logan. They often crossed paths on work issues, went to meetings together, and sometimes, when they could find time, they slipped away to be alone. At first, these were short moments, a quick hug in the corridor, a furtive kiss that lasted, but gradually they became more open. Emma knew that what she was doing was irreparable, but her dependence on Logan's attention, on his lifestyle and prospects grew. Sometimes he told her about New York, about the high-rise buildings in Manhattan, about expensive parties where you can easily meet influential people, about luxurious hotels. It seemed that all this was beyond the imagination of Emma, who was used to counting money before affording a new dress. But now she seemed to have a second wind. She was no longer embarrassed to dream about big sums, about a career, about how she could get out of the province. Did you buy a new dress? Jake once asked, seeing her in an elegant suit. Yes, beautiful. How much did it cost, if it's not a secret? Emma lied that she got a discount and the dress cost mere pennies, although in reality it was from the new collection, and she spent the money on it without hesitation. It became commonplace lying for the sake of new outfits, going to expensive restaurants with Logan, and she increasingly perceived home as a place where only duty awaited her, to care for Jake, who could not work full-time, and to continue to bear all the bills on her shoulders. Jake noticed that Emma was changing. He couldn't help but see the coldness in her gaze, the harsh answers, the attempts to be alone with the phone when someone called her. But he continued to hope that it was just stress. Moreover, he himself struggled with his demons. A back injury did not allow him to forget about himself, and cramped circumstances prevented him from offering his wife a more comfortable life. He often recalled those evenings when the two of them sat on the terrace and laughed at everything. Where did these moments go? Why did they stop being a team? One evening, when Emma stayed late until 11 and came home tired, Jake heard her sneaking into the room. He called her. Is everything okay? Maybe I should go to the store tomorrow morning if you're busy." "No," she snapped. "I'll figure it out myself. And in general, maybe I don't need to help me every time. I can handle it." The phrase didn't sound the way she wanted, but it was too late to take it back. There was irritation in his voice, as if he were an annoying child who was disturbing her life. Jake felt a pang of resentment. "Sorry, I thought I could somehow make your routine easier." Emma remained silent, feeling guilty, and at the same time irritated with herself, with him, with the whole situation. She felt like Jake didn't understand what she was going through, that she was essentially sacrificing her integrity and calmness for their common good. Of course, she made this choice herself, but her rage did not decrease. At work, Logan, meanwhile, continued to play the role of mentor and patron, not hiding mutual interest. One day, he gave her an expensive wallet, saying, "It's just a nice sign of attention, don't refuse." Emma understood that this was already going beyond purely friendly or work boundaries, and although her conscience reproached her, she did not want to refuse the gift. The hardest part was in those moments when they got physically close. Gradually, everything went further than kissing. Once Emma did not imagine herself capable of such deception, but now passion and thirst for a new life blinded her. After one of these secret evenings in Logan's rented apartment, she returned home well after midnight. Jake was already asleep by that time. She tried to dispel the slight smell of men's perfume on her neck with deodorant, but she was still afraid that he would notice something. "Why are you so late?" he asked darkly as she entered the bedroom, trying not to turn on the light. "I was late in the office. We have urgent work on the project," Emma lied habitually, raising her voice to seem confident. "And in general, I'm tired of your constant questions, Jake. You know I have a tough schedule." He sighed, and in the darkness, the words seemed stuck on his tongue. Finally, he just muttered, "Okay, sorry, good night." Sarah felt that Emma was moving away. Sometimes they correspond via messenger, less often they call each other. In the end, Sarah suggested meeting at a new Italian restaurant, not far from the shopping center. She wanted to discuss something and just chat. Emma promised to come, but then things came up and she canceled the meeting. Sarah decided to go there alone to have dinner after shopping, and what she saw shocked her. Sitting by the window, Sarah waited for the lasagna to be brought to her and looked at the visitors. And suddenly, at the far end of the hall, I noticed a familiar figure, Emma. At first, she was happy. She thought that her friend had come here by chance, maybe with her colleagues. But seeing the man sitting opposite, Sarah tensed. This was clearly not a colleague from the office. There was too much intimacy in their poses and glances. Sarah caught the gesture when Emma placed her hand on the man's palm, and he responded in kind. "What is she doing?" flashed through Sarah's head. From this angle, she couldn't see Logan's face, but she knew it definitely wasn't Jake. Which means, it can't be. My throat was dry and I lost my appetite. For several minutes, Sarah tried to decide whether to go straight there and ask what was going on. But seeing how close they were sitting to each other, I realized that this would be a huge scandal. She waited until Emma had gone away for a minute, perhaps to the ladies' room, and hurriedly paid for the dinner that had not yet been brought. Going outside, Sarah took out her phone and dialed her friend's number. Where are you?" Trying to speak calmly, she asked. "I'm, uh, at work," Emma responded after a short pause. "Yes, there is a lot to do." Sarah's heart sank at the lie she heard. "Listen, I saw you at the restaurant Casa di Lorenzo. I want to understand, what are you even doing?" There was silence on the line. Then Emma said, "Sarah, this. Well, we are discussing business with a partner. I'll explain everything to you later, okay?" Sarah sighed, realizing that there would be no clear explanation. She decided not to start a showdown over the phone, but was deeply disappointed in her friend. Emma is lying to Jake, and now she's lying too. It couldn't be clearer. After that call, Emma, returning to the table, with her heart pounding, tried to pretend that everything was fine. Logan, seeing the tension on her face, asked, "Everything is fine?" You suddenly turned pale. "Yes," Emma lied. "It's just that my friend found me here and was surprised. I will say that it was a business meeting." Logan shrugged. "Well, this is really a business meeting, albeit with a pleasant continuation." She did not develop the topic, knowing that she did not want to share this pleasant continuation with Sarah. She already understood that friendship, reputation, and, of course, her marriage were at stake. But she couldn't stop. Deep down, she hoped that Sarah would remain silent because she did not want to traumatize Jake. When she returned home, Jake noticed that Emma was avoiding his eyes. He wanted to ask how dinner went, who was there, but something inside told him it was better to remain silent. He kept waiting for the right moment to talk, but it never came. Emma made the usual excuse with a long story about work, then said that she needed to go to bed early. Sarah could not sleep all night, replaying the scene she had seen in her head. She felt a conflict. On the one hand, this is Emma's life, and she herself is responsible for her actions. On the other hand, how did Jake, who always treated Sarah with respect, help when she had personal difficulties? He didn't deserve such betrayal. Sarah decided she would talk to Emma alone for now before doing anything more drastic. Jake, who had been credited with a calm demeanor and delicacy all his life, began to notice too many warning signs. Emma often stayed late, became indifferent or irritable to his questions, appeared at home only in the evenings, and immediately locked herself in the bedroom or bathroom. She changed her clothing style, began wearing expensive suits, and buying accessories that she had not previously allowed herself. And at the same time, she allegedly did not receive any increase in salary. One evening, when Emma once again said that he needed to stay, he decided to go to the garage and rummage through old boxes looking for some tools. I accidentally came across her old bag, in which there were some receipts from boutiques, obviously not cheap. This is not like the old Emma, he thought. Even if she had a small bonus, she wouldn't spend it so impulsively. Something didn't add up here. That same night, he called his friend Dan, a friend from his school days, who now worked in the local detective bureau. Jake hesitated for a long time, then finally decided. Listen, Dan, I have a strange request for you. I need to keep an eye on my wife. I'm not sure what's going on, but she's changed a lot. It's important for me to understand what happened. Dan, after listening, agreed, although he warned that such surveillance was a sensitive matter. But Jake felt that he couldn't handle it on his own, and he had no choice. Within a couple of days, Dan announced that they had photographs. Emma often meets with a certain man named Logan Reese, and not only in an office setting, but also in restaurants, bars, and appears next to his car at late times. They might be getting a hotel room, Dan wrote, but there has been no exact confirmation yet. Jake, reading these lines, already understood where everything was going. His heart ached in pain, but he needed iron confidence. Over the next few days, Jake's suspicions became almost paranoid. He caught every detail: how Emma hid her phone when he was nearby, how she flinched when she received a new message. She stopped talking about her colleagues and spoke only general phrases. One time he asked, "Emma, are you happy with me? Are we okay?" She looked away and muttered, "Of course, it's just too much work. And please don't bother me with such questions. I'm tired." His heart sank somewhere downward, as if anticipating the inevitable. But he didn't want to provoke a scandal until he was 100% sure. Meanwhile, his inner world was collapsing. He hardly slept at night, replaying in his head how everything could have turned out differently if not for his disability, if he could earn money and give Emma the stability and luxury she dreams of. His misgivings intensified when one day he saw Emma receive a call on her cell phone. She quickly turned off the sound and, noticing his gaze, said something inaudible, "For work." But I saw how her fingers trembled when she hid the phone in her pocket. All this was reminiscent of a bad detective story where he became the main character against his own will. The silence and tension in the house increased day by day. Emma pretended that everything was fine. Sometimes she cooked breakfast and tried to smile, as if out of habit. But there was already a wall of misunderstandings between them that they could not break through. And then one day Dan called Jake and said, "I have photographs confirming that they entered the hotel together. Do you want me to send it?" At that moment, Jake felt his heart beating in his throat. He understood that after looking at these photos, he would no longer be able to dismiss the truth. Nevertheless, he asked to send it. Everything in him screamed with pain and anger, but he knew that if this was true, then perhaps divorce was the only way out. The evening turned out to be unusually hot for the end of spring. Jake sat on the living room couch, phone in hand, as if hypnotized. There were photographs in front of him. Emma and Logan entering the hotel, laughing leisurely in the parking lot. There was no question of any business meeting. He kissed her temple. She pressed her shoulder to him. The picture spoke for itself. At some point, everything swam before my eyes from a surge of anger. Jake clenched his hand into a fist and almost broke the screen, but restrained himself. He understood that hysterics would not help him. You need to wait for Emma, look her in the eyes, and demand an explanation. But deep down, he already knew the answer. Betrayal was obvious. In the evening, Emma entered the house, trying to look cheerful, although she was tense. She had to come up with an excuse for being late again. Seeing Jake's gloomy face, sitting with the phone in his hands, she immediately realized that something was wrong. "Are you okay?" she asked, trying not to show her excitement. "You seem upset about something." He slowly raised his gaze, which was filled with such obvious grief and anger that Emma became afraid. Silently, he turned the screen towards her, and this one gesture was enough for everything to become clear. The photo was of her with Logan, and the photos were clearly taken on the sly. It was impossible to make excuses. "Do you want to explain what's going on here?" Jake squeezed out, his voice sounding hoarse. Emma froze, feeling how cold everything inside was. She didn't know what to say. She stood silently for a few seconds, then muttered, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen like this." Jake jumped up, throwing his phone on the sofa. "You didn't want to. You betrayed me. All these months I guessed, but did not want to believe. How could you?" The tone of the voice cut the air. It seemed that a little more, and it would wipe all the things in the house into dust. He even took a couple of steps towards her, but not with the intention of hitting her, but to see her face as close as possible. "Jake, I don't know. I was unhappy. I understood that we would never get out of this swamp." Emma herself did not believe that she was saying these words, but they poured out like excuses. "You can't give me what I want from life." He recoiled as if he had been hit. Until recently, it seemed that the worst thing was to find out about her betrayal. But now, having heard directly from her lips the admission that he was not able to give her what she wanted, his heart seemed to break. Tears welled up in my eyes, and pride screamed inside. "So you're happy with a man who," he squinted, trying not to burst into tears, "who is simply richer, more successful than me?" "It's not just money," Emma objected, trembling with despair. "He gives me perspective, a chance to live the way I dreamed. I'm tired of doing everything alone. I was afraid that I would grow old, counting every cent, while you—" She paused. "Sorry." Jake smiled bitterly. "Do I really deserve such meanness? I love you, damn it." Or loved. His voice broke. "If you really wanted a different life, you could say it openly, talk to me. But you chose the path of lies and betrayal." Emma couldn't find the words to explain that it all started out seemingly as an innocent flirtation, and then grew into something more, and she herself didn't notice how she got stuck. And now, looking at her husband's suffering face, she felt like the last piece of trash. But it was too late to turn things back. "Go away," Jake said suddenly, lowering his gaze. "I can't stand it. Just pack your things and leave if he gives you the life you dream of." "Wait," Emma rushed towards him, trying to grab his hand. "We can." "No." He jerked his hand away. "You can do whatever you want, but I'll have to do what I need to do. File for divorce." Tears ran down his cheeks, but he quickly wiped them away with the back of his hand. It seemed that Emma's heart was torn with guilt, but she herself did not understand what exactly she wanted. Part of her yearned for Logan and the life he promised, while another part screamed that she had just lost the person closest to her. She sat down on the floor, sobbing, and whispered, "I'm sorry. Forgive me. I didn't want it to go this far." But Jake didn't try to calm her down. He just leaned his elbows against the wall, breathing heavily, trying to maintain at least the remainder of his composure. One thought pulsed in his brain: his life had collapsed. What he treasured turned out to be an illusion. After a few minutes of silence, Emma realized that there was no point in staying here any longer. Jake has already made his decision, and she can't change anything. Gathering her strength, she got up, headed to the bedroom, took out her bag and began to put things away, not making out where everything was. My hands were shaking, my eyes were filled with tears. She understood that she would have to ask Logan for temporary housing or rent a room somewhere because there was nowhere else to go. My parents are far away, and I don't have the courage to admit such a shame to them. When she walked past Jake with the suitcase, he didn't even look in her direction. He seemed petrified, staring at the empty wall. When the door closed, he finally let out a groan, full of pain and hopelessness. His strength left him. He fell to his knees and burst into tears. Jake had never felt such heartache in his life. The events of the next morning were like a dream. There was deathly silence in the house. Emma left, taking most of her things. Jake spent the whole night in the living room, going over every moment of their life together. He never slept a wink. When dawn broke, he decided to do what he considered the only possible thing: dial the lawyer's number. "Steve, hello? Sorry, it's so early. Yes, I need to file for divorce. Urgently," he said in a trembling voice into the phone. No, this is final. Yes, let's meet." Having hung up the phone, he sat for a long time with his head in his hands. Only now did he begin to understand what an abyss his life was falling into. Without Emma, the house seemed empty and cold, and yet he could not forgive her betrayal, could not close his eyes to it. Any thought about trying to save the marriage was met with the image of Emma hugging another man. Emma, in turn, was sitting in Logan's car, parked at the entrance of his temporary apartment. Tears were streaming down her cheeks, and Logan didn't seem to know what to do. He tried to cheer her up. "Listen, everything will be fine. Maybe you and Jake should take a break and sort yourself out." Pause. "He doesn't want to see me," Emma sobbed. "I destroyed everything. And for what? Maybe I made the biggest mistake in my life." Logan gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "Look, we have feelings for each other. I understand that everything happened very abruptly, but maybe you were just afraid to admit to yourself that you need another man in another life." Emma looked at him sharply, trying to figure out if he saw her as just a pretty toy. This question kept coming up more and more often. Does he really love me, or is he flattered by hunting for a married woman? For now, she didn't know where to go, and decided to believe his assurances that he would help her get settled. So, it turns out, she finally chose Logan's side, although her soul was full of confusion and guilt. That morning, she texted Sarah, "I left Jake. I'll tell you everything later." Sarah only answered briefly, "Take care of yourself." However, Emma felt that her friend was judging her, and she realized that she had still lost. Once they were inseparable, but now there is an abyss of misunderstanding between them. Meanwhile, Jake called his mother, Marge, who lived in another city. She was a widow and did not see her son often, but they kept in touch. Hearing the trembling in his voice, she instantly jumped up and promised to come that evening. As soon as she entered the house, Jake could not stand it and burst into tears in her arms like a little boy. What did she do? Marge wailed, pressing his head to her shoulder. "Quietly, son. I'm here. We'll figure it out." "Mom," he moaned. "Everything is broken. I don't know how to live on." She remembered Emma as a sweet girl who had once seemed like the perfect match for her son, and it was hard for her to believe that she could do such a thing. But what's done is done. Now she could only support Jake and help him not fall into complete depression. In the afternoon, a lawyer came, listened to Jake, and wrote down the main details. He said that Emma worked, and he received a disability pension. The lawyer hinted that he could try to sue half of the joint property because she cheated, but Jake just waved his hand tiredly. "I don't need anything from her. Let him take what he wants. I don't want to drag out this torment for a long time." The lawyer nodded, but asked to think again and not make hasty statements in the courts. It is better to have a strong position. Jake didn't want to listen to anything. He simply sought to break off this relationship, which could not be returned. When the lawyer left, Marge prepared him broth, trying to somehow feed him. Jake sat, staring at one point, and remembered all the good things he and Emma had. It seemed that he was experiencing the death of a loved one, and this was partly true after all. The Emma he knew died, giving way to another, someone else. In the evening, Marge put him to bed, and she began to clean up the house, throwing out old pieces of paper and medicine packaging. Walking into the hallway, she noticed a framed wedding photo on the nightstand. There they were so happy, young, smiling at each other and holding hands. Marge sighed heavily and decided to put the photo away so that in the morning it would not remind her son that his dreams had been shattered. That same night, Emma, lying in bed next to Logan, could not sleep. He was already dozing, but her thoughts were feverishly wandering. She remembered the first time she met Jake in college, their walks, how he made fun of her, and she laughed, feeling that she was safe next to him. Won't all this come back now? She thought, and clenched her fists in pain. Having abandoned her home and husband, she seemed to have achieved freedom, but for some reason she felt not like a winner, but a loser. Perhaps because in her desire for a better life, she lost someone who was her family. Or maybe because even with Logan, she didn't feel the spiritual harmony that she once gave Hey Jake. The silence around seemed oppressive. Outside the window, the night city was noisy, the sirens of police cars, the rustle of tires on the asphalt, and Emma noticed for the first time that she did not feel the joy that she expected from her new life. Instead, I felt devastation, as if I was standing on the threshold of something much more complex and terrible. Jake woke up early in the morning in completely unusual silence. When he opened his eyes, he saw the familiar pattern of wallpaper, the faded light penetrating through the cracks in the shutters, and heard only the beating of his own heart. There were no Emma's usual footsteps along the corridor, nor the smell of the coffee she always brewed in the morning. Cursing quietly, Jake tried to turn onto his side, but a pang of pain in his lower back reminded him of his injury. He sat down on the bed with a groan and grabbed the phone. It was only 6 in the morning. It was already the second day since Emma left the house, and he still couldn't get used to the idea that now no one was tiptoeing around here anymore, trying not to wake him up ahead of time. An attempt to shake myself up and start the day turned into complete apathy. He boiled water in a kettle, but looking at the empty chair opposite, he realized that he could not bring himself to eat even a bite. It seemed that this house had become too big and cold, and this was just a one-story modest house in Ohio where they had lived for so many years. Now any movement echoed in the chest with the pain of memories. A couple of hours later, unable to stand being alone, he called his mother. Marge arrived last evening, tried to calm her son down, prepare food for him, but she had to return to her home as she had business and volunteer duties waiting for her. Hearing his voice, she asked worriedly, "How are you, dear? Still awake?" Slept in fits and starts. Jake ran his hand over his face. He felt the uneven stubble because he had never shaved. "I'm trying to hold on, but everything inside feels dead." Marge offered to come again, but he refused, saying he needed to be alone. In fact, he was afraid to cry directly into the phone. His pride did not allow him to ask for support once again. After talking with his mother, he overcame himself and took a shower. The warm water slightly helped to relax my back, but thoughts about divorce, about Emma's betrayal, did not go away. He soon discovered that in the mirror he saw a man whom he barely recognized, a haggard face, reddened eyes, and this endless emptiness in his soul. Perhaps if he had been healthy, managed to work in a decent position, he would have kept his wife. "Stop," Jake ordered himself, realizing that self-flagellation would not help. She made her choice, and he must somehow move on with his life. The whole day dragged on unbearably slowly. Jake tried to distract himself. He turned on the TV, where there were replays of basketball games, then tried to read a book about old American football stars. Everything seemed meaningless. A little later, the phone rang. It turned out that this was Dan, the same acquaintance who helped Jake with the detective. "Hello, buddy. How are you there?" A quiet voice sounded on the phone. Jake sighed heavily. "Honestly, lousy, but thanks for asking." "Sorry to remind you," Dan continued, "but you are going to finally confirm the divorce filing, right?" "The lawyer already called me. He wanted to clarify a couple of details about the dates of surveillance." Jake's heart sank unpleasantly. He understood that now all these questions would become official documents, court summonses. "Yes, that's right," he said. "Thank you for your help. Although, to be honest, I'm not glad that I now know the whole truth." When evening came, Jake felt his throat dry from the tears that never came out. He firmly decided to go to the nearest bar in order to somehow forget. It wasn't that he never drank, but he was cautious about alcohol because of the painkillers he was taking. "However, now I don't want to think about the consequences." The inside of the bar was dim and smoky, smelling of fried wings and cheap tobacco. Several people were crowded around the televisions, discussing the baseball match. Jake sat down at the bar and ordered a whiskey with ice. The bartender nodded, recognizing his face. After all, Jake used to be a local celebrity, a college sports hope. Today, sympathy was visible in his gaze, although he did not say anything out loud. "How long have you been in?" asked the bartender, handing him a glass. "I don't know," Jake shrugged. "You just need to disconnect from your thoughts." Tasting the whiskey, he felt a bitter taste, but continued to drink, trying to drown out his own pain. Half an hour later, he had already emptied the second glass, realizing that he might be acting stupidly. But he didn't care. Looking at the people around him, he envied their carefree laughter, jokes, and chatter about sports. It seemed to him that his life had collapsed, and everyone else continued to live as if nothing had happened. A little later, he heard someone sit down next to him. It was his old friend Josh, who played on the same team with him many years ago. "Dude, I heard you were in trouble," Josh said quietly, trying not to attract attention. "Sorry if I'm invading privacy, but our whole town is already whispering." Jake shook his head with a bitter smile. "Yes, Emma left, and it looks like everything is going to hell. Listen, if you need any support, help, just tell me," Josh suggested. "I work at my father's auto repair shop. Maybe I can find you a part-time job, or we can just have a beer together." Such participation nearly brought Jake to tears. He shrugged. "Thank you. I will think. Now I need to at least come to my senses." And so the difficult evening ended. Jake, staggering, returned home closer to midnight and with difficulty locked the door behind him. There was a throbbing pain in my head, but it was nothing compared to the spiritual emptiness. He silently collapsed on the sofa, covering his face with his hands, feeling that he was unaccustomed to such doses of alcohol. Intoxication brought almost no relief, only intensified the melancholy. Only in the morning, having fallen into a short, anxious sleep, did he realize that a new life was beginning. Nothing remained of his previous plans for a happy family, and now he had to learn, step by step, to live alone. He was scared, but he saw no other way. Emma woke up in a luxurious bed, looking at the snow-white sheets, almost for the first time feeling the soft feather bed as if she had slept in a five-star hotel. In fact, it was a kind of hotel. Logan rented spacious apartments in a skyscraper located in the very center of the city. Through the panoramic windows, one could see the lights of the metropolis, although the city was still not as gigantic as New York, which he often talked about. Emma sat up in bed and breathed in the cool air from the air conditioner. A small pang reminded her that she was not here because she won the lottery or made a career breakthrough. She ran away from home after cheating, leaving her husband alone. Logan was already on his feet. He managed to take a shower and, judging by the sounds from the kitchen, was making himself coffee. When Emma came out to him, he handed her a cup of aromatic drink with a smile. "Morning, beauty," he said, bending down slightly to kiss her on the cheek. "How did you sleep?" "Fine," Emma lied, although in fact she had been tossing and turning most of the night. Logan looked at her carefully. "I know that your head is confused. Maybe we should take a little vacation. Go somewhere for the weekend where it's not so stuffy and doesn't remind you of past problems." Emma took a sip of her coffee, trying to concentrate. She wanted to take a break, but the financial side of the issue was annoying. After all, she left home with only a few suitcases of clothes, and although she still had a job at Mrs. Gibson's company, it all became somehow irrelevant, given that Logan was largely working as an outside consultant, and their affair was no longer a secret to those close to them. True, it was still not obvious to the team, but some colleagues guessed. After breakfast, they got into Logan's car, a huge black SUV, and drove to the office. Emma felt increasing tension with every kilometer. How can she now enter a team where she is known as a married woman, and she has publicly moved to a consultant? Will she be able to continue working without judgment and whispers behind her back? Logan stopped the car in the underground parking lot and smiled slightly. Are you with me? She nodded frantically, but walked out with an uncertain step. To be brave, she straightened her jacket, remembering that she needed to look her best. Maybe this will at least boost her self-esteem a little. Mrs. Gibson met them at the office, looking as if everything was fine. But Emma noticed how the boss glanced briefly at Logan and then at her, and a lot of things were already read from that glance. She guesses, Emma realized. However, no one had canceled projects yet, and they needed to continue presentations and negotiations with clients. Emma fell into a routine, desperately trying to distract herself. Around noon, she met Sarah in the corridor. She stood at the water cooler and, seeing Emma, frowned. Can we talk? Sarah asked quietly. Listen, I have meetings now. Emma began to make excuses, but eventually gave in. Okay, let's go to the break room for 10 minutes. Once in the break room, Sarah closed the door and turned to her friend. Well, tell me, how did you get to this point? Sarah, I can't make excuses now. Everything is too confusing. Yes, I left Jake. Yes, I live with Logan. Emma sighed heavily. I know what it looks like from the outside. It looks like you traded your husband for money and glitter, Sarah blurted out, although she tried to speak without unnecessary aggression. As long as we've been friends, I never thought that you were capable of this. Emma felt a pang of conscience. She peered into Sarah's face, trying to find understanding, but there was only reproach and bitterness there. I'm tired of living in eternal poverty, she admitted, trying to keep the trembling in her voice. Jake, he's good, but life with him is a dead end. Are you sure that life with Logan is not a worse dead end? Sarah asked a reasonable question. Are you sure he wants something more than just an affair? Emma didn't have an answer. So far, she has only seen that Logan is arrogant, confident, and likes to spend money on luxury. But does he really have deep feelings for her? I have to figure it out myself. I have already made a choice, she muttered. Sarah shook her head as she prepared to leave. When she left, Emma nearly burst into tears. A feeling of shame and regret suddenly washed over her, but she pushed these feelings away, repeating to herself that it was time to move on. In the evening, he and Logan went to an expensive restaurant. He ordered lobster, oysters, and expensive wine. Emma sat at the table in a beautiful dress, but deep down she felt uncomfortable. She remembered how she and Jake used to go to some pizzeria, laughing at the stupid stories of the local radio station. In my previous life, I didn't have such a luxurious environment, but there was warmth and sincerity. You're not yourself, Logan remarked, handing her a glass. Maybe you can share? She grimaced. I'm just tired. And I'm a little worried that everyone in the office is starting to whisper to each other. Logan chuckled. Let them whisper. I don't care. If Mrs. Gibson has any questions, I can talk to her. The main thing is that our project continues and makes a profit. Emma nodded, trying to fake a smile. But inside, everything screamed that she had found herself in a golden cage where her fate now depended on the profitability of the project, and Logan himself could lose interest in her at any moment. After a week of living like this, Emma was already living out of suitcases in Logan's apartment, hanging her clothes in his dressing room, using his washing machine, taking food out of his refrigerator. She noticed that he was not too eager to share everyday life. Rather, he perceived her presence as something temporary, a pleasant addition to his life. At night, they sometimes made love, but more and more often he returned late, citing a meeting with partners, and she remained alone, feeling the clouds of doubt gathering. One of those evenings, when Logan didn't show up on time, Emma put on his cotton shirt and went out onto the balcony. The city below was bustling with lights, some were having fun in the clubs, others were hurrying home. She remembered the house she left behind. Jake, who may now be sitting in the dark and suffering. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she clenched her fists and repeated to herself, I can no longer live as before. We need to move forward. However, the voice of conscience sounded louder. Instead of harmony and freedom, she found anxiety, a feeling that she had made a fatal mistake. And although her life outwardly became more luxurious, it did not fill her soul with happiness. The next day, as soon as Emma arrived at the office, she came face to face with Sarah in the hallway outside the reception area. She looked stern, but without the same hostility. Looks like she had some news to share. Just a minute, she said, taking her friend aside. I don't know if you know, but there are rumors in town that you went to Logan for money and a career. I tried to shame everyone by saying that this is your personal business, but I'm afraid this is no longer under my control. Emma's insides went cold. She understood that rumors was putting it mildly. In fact, now her name could only be associated with betrayal. Small towns have one unpleasant feature. People love gossip, and if someone makes a mistake, it immediately becomes public knowledge. All day long, she felt sideways glances at her. Colleagues whispered, pretending that this did not concern her, but she saw these short nods and half smiles. When she went out for lunch to get coffee at a nearby cafe, she accidentally met a couple of former classmates whom she had not seen for many years. They looked at her and began to whisper something among themselves. Emma, feeling a surge of shame, turned around and left without buying coffee. Returning to the office, she locked herself in the women's restroom and burst into tears, trying not to make any sounds. She recalled how she had once been proud of her honesty, her principles, and now they think of her as a selfish woman who exchanged her disabled husband for a successful lover. And this had its own cruel truth. That same evening, she came across a message on social networks from one of her old friends. She wrote sympathetically, Hello, Em, I heard that things are not easy for you. I don't judge, but I hope you don't get lost. Reading this, Emma felt for the first time how badly she needed real support, which no one could give her now. Logan took the ignore it attitude, and she herself didn't know how to protect herself from the guilt. This time, Sarah did not give moralizing lectures. After work, she caught up with Emma at the elevator and suggested, Listen, maybe we can go have some coffee. Let's just chat without insults or reproaches. Emma agreed. They went to a small cafe nearby. There, after ordering a latte, Emma was finally able to speak out. She told Sarah how hard it was for her to leave, but she really didn't think she could be happy with Jake. However, now she feels shame and feels as if all the respect of others has been taken away from her. Sarah listened and nodded. Yes, you probably imagined that everything would be nice and easy with Logan. But life is different. I never said Jake was perfect, but he truly loved you. Emma stared into the cup, stirring the foam. I think I loved him too, but we both found ourselves at a dead end. Sarah shrugged. Understand. So what now? Is Logan your ticket to a new life? I'm not sure anymore, Emma smiled bitterly. Sometimes he reminds me that I am here only because of my usefulness. And I see that he is not going to turn our relationship into something deep and family. Sarah paused, giving her friend a chance to process everything that had been said. In the end, she just said, Okay, I won't bother with advice. The conversation with Sarah did not bring complete relief, but it somehow relieved the tension. Emma returned to Logan's apartment and, finding him in the kitchen with a glass of wine, decided to talk calmly. Logan, we need to discuss what kind of relationship we have. I understand that everything happened abruptly, but I need to know whether we have a common future or is this just a temporary hobby. He put the glass on the table, walked up to her, and hugged her shoulders. Why so categorical? I don't plan to leave you if that's what you mean. But, you know I have a lot of business plans and I don't like to feel tied down. Let's just enjoy the moment. Her heart skipped a beat. This wording sounded like an invitation to a frivolous connection. But before she could protest, he was already kissing her, trying to change the subject. They ended up spending the night together, But Emma felt the feeling of shame and emptiness continue to grow inside her. The next morning, she got up early so as not to cross paths with Logan and went outside, wanting to take a walk alone. Walking past a newsstand, I noticed that on the front page of the local newspaper, there was an article about local business projects in large letters. The name mentioned at the bottom was Logan Reese and the company Emma works for. Standing on the sidewalk, she watched cars pass by, people going to work, someone walking their dogs. They all seem indifferent to her troubles, each with their own life. But suddenly Emma caught herself thinking that no matter where she herself could not run away from regret for what she had done. This feeling of shame will haunt her until she finds the strength to change something, or until she finally accepts that she has chosen this path and is responsible for it. Returning to her apartment at noon, she checked her phone. Several missed calls from an unfamiliar number and one message from a lawyer. The text was brief. Notice of divorce. Your signature is required. Please come to the office as soon as possible. Emma's heart sank, as if reminding her that this was not just an affair, this was the end of a married life. A life that she herself had torn apart. Clutching the phone in her hands, Emma worked herself up with thoughts. So, that's it. Jake is not going to delay the divorce, and I didn't leave him a chance. She sank onto the sofa, trying to imagine what her future existence would look like. Divorce documents are not just a formality, but the end of an entire stage. And at that moment, it became clear to her that shame was only half the problem. The second part of her problem is that she is not sure if she received anything truly valuable in return for the family she lost. Jake woke up to the tedious ringing of the phone, which broke the morning silence in the house. He reached for the bedside table, feeling pain in his back and realizing that he had fallen asleep in an uncomfortable position again. The lawyer's number appeared on the screen. "Hello," he muttered, trying not to sound sleepy. "Jake, hello. This is Steve. Sorry it's early, but there's news." Emma said she was ready to sign the papers. "I was wondering if we would file a counterclaim for division of property, given your circumstances." Jake's heart sank. He imagined Emma going to the lawyer, signing documents that would annul their marriage, as if erasing all memories. He had already thought about property more than once. The house they bought on credit, the car that was registered in his name, some savings. "I don't want to delay," he said. "I don't need this house anymore. It's too big for one." Steve clarified. "So, are you ready to give the house to her or sell it? Let him take it if he wants. I just need to get a few things, family photos and a couple of mementos. I don't need the rest." The lawyer was obviously surprised. But Jake did not go into details. He was not going to defend his share, since this house now only reminded him of what was lost. Putting down the phone, Jake realized that it was time to find a way to earn at least some money, since his disability pension was barely enough to live on. He couldn't work physically, so he was looking for options for remote employment or office part-time work. Having again scrolled through all the ideas in my head, I remembered how I once ran a children's football club on a voluntary basis. But now, with an injury and lost confidence, I didn't know whether they would want to take him. However, inaction seemed even worse, so he decided to call the sports center where he had friends. To his surprise, those on the other end of the line reacted warmly to the idea. "We remember you, Jake. Perhaps the role of assistant youth football coach would suit you," the center director suggested. "I don't promise big money, but it's better than nothing." Jake agreed to come and see what was what. My soul felt a little lighter from the thought that he was not completely useless. Before leaving the house, he looked around. Empty walls. In some places, there were traces of paintings and photographs that Emma had taken when leaving. Half the cabinets were empty. This place no longer felt like home. He decided that he would sell the furniture he didn't need and move to a more modest apartment. It would be easier. Taking the phone, he found several advertisements on the internet, "I'll buy furniture," and started calling. The voice on the other end often asked the question, "Why are you selling everything at once?" And Jake quietly answered that he was leaving town. In fact, he didn't yet know if he would leave the city forever, but he didn't want to explain the details to strangers. After finishing the phone calls, he felt tired, as if he had spent several hours of hard physical work. Psychologically, it was difficult to get rid of things that connected him with the past. Here is the sofa where he and Emma watched movies. Here is the kitchen table where she did her homework when she was in her advanced course. Now everything is for sale because he himself no longer sees the point in keeping these memories. Swallowing his bitterness, Jake remembered Steve's words, "It's better not to make sudden moves under stress, but this is your life." He realized that he might be taking irreversible actions, but he couldn't do it any other way. That same day, a lawyer came to see him in person to sign some documents. Steve was a confident, middle-aged man who always wore an impeccable suit. He spread papers on the table and showed where to sign. Question about alimony. You are supposed to demand financial support, given your status as a disabled person, he suggested. In some states, this is possible under such circumstances. Jake just smiled bitterly. Do you want Emma to support me? She's been putting it off all these years, but now, no, I can't afford it. Steve shook his head. I understand, but legally it could be compensation. No, don't. She's with someone else now anyway, and I'm not going to pursue her for money. The lawyer shrugged. As you say. But then we are left with only the question of dividing the house and property. An hour later, when Steve left, Jake literally collapsed into his chair, feeling that all these formalities had squeezed the last of his strength out of him. He wanted to scream, but his throat was in a spasm. Remembering the conversation with the director of the sports center, he decided to change clothes and go there to take the first step towards a new life. Maybe there, among the teenagers, among the field and the sound of the whistle, he will find the elusive faith in himself. The sports center was located a couple of miles from his house. Jake got into his old car, which had once been the pride of the newlyweds, but now required repairs. I started it with difficulty and drove off, trying not to think about financial problems. On the way, he stopped at a gas station, and there he met a former classmate who also knew about the scandal with Emma. He, trying to cheer him up, offered to meet for beer in the evening, but Jake, thanking him, politely refused. Just yesterday, he got drunk in a bar and realized that this was not an option. As he entered the sports center, the familiar smell of sweat, rubber, and floor disinfectant filled his nose. Teenagers, boys of different ages, rushed along the corridors with balls under their arms. As a child, Jake adored such places. Life was in full swing here, and sports united people. He was greeted by the director, a short man with piercing eyes and the manner of a former Marine. He led Jake into the training room, where boys about 12 to 14 years old were sitting on mats. These are our beginning players, the director explained. We don't have enough coaches. We appreciate any help. I know about your injury, so you won't have to actively run. We need someone who can give children the right guidance and guidance. Hearing this, Jake felt a ray of warmth in his chest. He remembered how he once ran with a ball, dreamed of a professional future, and now he can at least pass on his experience. If he can help at least one of these boys believe in a dream, maybe it will give him the strength to move on. The lesson lasted a couple of hours. Jake dug in, listening to the head coach explain the basics of strategy and technique to the young men. From time to time, guys came up to him and asked about positions in the game, how to hold the ball correctly. He saw respect and curiosity in their eyes. Is this the same Jake who once shined on the college team? Towards the end of the lesson, the coach patted him on the shoulder. You did great. I hope next time you can do some of the training yourself. Jake smiled, feeling something come alive inside. Maybe this is the beginning of his broken world, but a world where he himself will try to move on, no matter what happens. Returning home in the evening, he no longer felt such suffocating melancholy. Of course, the pain had not gone away. Emma was still his main wound, but now he had at least some purpose. Entering the house, he noticed that there was a voice message from Sarah on the answering machine. She timidly asked how he was feeling, offered to meet, and just talk if he had no one to share it with. Jake appreciated this, although he understood that Sarah was Emma's friend. but maybe she still wants to help. Taking a deep breath, he dialed her number. He needed to admit to someone how hard it was for him and be heard. While the telephone beeps were ringing, he looked at the empty walls and thought that there was a long road ahead to a new life. Emma sat in the corner of the spacious living room in Logan's apartment, staring at the clock that ticked away in the silence. It was past 9 o'clock in the evening, and Logan still wasn't there. He sent a short message a couple of hours ago. "I'm staying with a client, don't wait up." Although she understood that his work could be unpredictable, her soul did not find peace. Lately, he was staying late more and more often, arriving late, sometimes smelling of alcohol or light feminine perfume. She tried to blame it on the employees, that someone nearby might have sprayed perfume. But doubts crept deeper. To somehow distract herself, Emma turned on the TV and came across another business show. They talked about the real estate market and investments. A couple of presenters mentioned Logan Reese's name as a rising star in consulting, but also recalled the aggressive methods and risks associated with his strategies. Emma wondered, does she really know so little about the man for whom she left her husband? Grabbing her phone, she rummaged through the search engine and began reading articles, among which she came across several notes. Logan Reese, a success story and high-profile scandals in New York. Scandals. It turned out that in the past he had already been accused of not entirely legal real estate schemes, but there was not enough evidence then. Suddenly, the front door slammed and Logan appeared in the living room. He looked slightly tense, but when he saw Emma with a tablet in her hands, he smiled. "Hello, dear. Sorry it's so late. An urgent matter popped up. I didn't expect it." She nodded, hiding her confusion. "It's clear. What's the matter?" "Yes, little things." He waved it off, putting away his jacket and loosening the knot of his tie. The client wanted to make changes to the investment agreement. I had to spend a couple of extra hours with him. Emma put the tablet away, feeling that it was dangerous to ask direct questions. But she couldn't help herself. "Logan, tell me, did you have a lot of problems at your previous job?" "I accidentally came across articles about some scandals." He tensed. "These are all journalistic inventions. My competitors don't like me, so they're trying to tarnish my reputation. Don't fill your head with nonsense." She noticed that he was angry. I decided to change the topic and offered to have dinner, but Logan refused. "I already ate with a client. It's better to drink a glass of wine and go to bed." While he was pouring the wine, Emma decided to talk about something else about her future in the company. "Logan, I'm worried about how the office is reacting to our connection. Maybe we should talk to Mrs. Gibson to sort things out." He snorted. "Why would this be settled? We are both adults. I don't see a problem. If they want drama, that's their business. It's just that there are rumors that I received advantages due to an affair with you." She tried to speak calmly, but inside everything was seething. "I hate that everyone is whispering behind my back." Logan shrugged. "Let them envy. You earned your position yourself, and whoever disagrees is not our decree." For a moment, it seemed to Emma that he was right, but the feeling of anxiety did not go away. Perhaps it was not a matter of rumors, but the fact that he increasingly showed a domineering, even despotic nature. She remembered how he recently asked her to quit, leave the cheap company, and go with him to a large capital project. Then she refused, saying that she could not break away from her usual life so abruptly. Logan was angry, saying that she was afraid to take risks for big money. Now she herself did not know whether she had done the right thing, because by remaining in her hometown, she exposed herself to the condemnation of all her acquaintances. The next day, she woke up to find that Logan had already left. No note, just an empty bed and the smell of his perfume. She had to go to the office alone. There she met Sarah and, gathering her courage, asked to talk for a while. "I don't think I know Logan," Emma admitted as they retreated to a quiet corner by the window. "He hides everything, gets angry if I ask questions. I'm no longer sure if I did the right thing by leaving Jake." Sarah sighed sadly. "I don't want to lecture, but, you're rushing things. Maybe you should have first decided on your feelings and not rushed into a new relationship." Still, it's up to you to decide. Emma nodded, unable to find anything to say. She understood that Sarah, despite all her friendship, did not approve of her actions, and Emma herself felt as if she had signed up for something dangerous. The situation worsened in the evening. Emma, already leaving the office, received a call from Mrs. Gibson. She asked to come see her. The boss sat in the office with her lips pursed. "Emma, I heard that you and Logan are, let's say, together. I don't care about the personal relationships of employees, but unfortunately, there are complaints from several colleagues who claim that you are taking advantage of your official position." Emma turned pale. "Do they seriously think that? But this is not true. I'm not trying to deceive anyone. I've known you for a long time," Mrs. Gibson interrupted in a softer tone. "But the company is going through hard times, and we don't need any scandals. Try to figure it out so it doesn't affect your work. Otherwise, you will have to reconsider your participation in projects." Emma nodded, feeling a lump in her throat. Apparently, Logan's reputation and their connection could really harm her. Without a job, she will be left with nothing because she has no family savings after the divorce. Returning to the apartment, she found Logan in high spirits, as if he did not even suspect that a conflict was breaking out in the office. When she told him about Mrs. Gibson's words, he just waved it off. "Tell her you'll quit if she doesn't like it. I'm planning to move to a larger city. You can come with me." Hearing this, Emma flared up. "Do you want me to drop everything and run after you? What if I'm not ready to take that risk?" Logan's eyes sparkled. "What do you see here? Constant stress, gossip, unattainable prospects. I thought you wanted a big life, or were these all just words?" Emma lowered her shoulders. "I want to, but not in this way, and I don't like it when you give orders." He came up to her, almost close, and said quietly but firmly, "Listen, honey, this is the world of business. Either you ride the wave or you drown. I'm not going to babysit. Decide for yourself." There was a threat in his voice that made Emma feel cold. She suddenly realized that she was seeing the real Logan, an ambitious, tough man who did not tolerate objections or emotions, and she didn't know what to do about it. Sunday has arrived. Jake, as was his habit, woke up early due to lower back pain. But today he felt an incomprehensible excitement. Last night Emma called him. At first he didn't even want to pick up the phone, but curiosity overpowered him. They said a couple of dry phrases to each other, and she asked to meet. "I need to talk to you." Her voice sounded so quiet that he could barely hear it. He agreed, although he did not understand what she wanted to achieve. In the afternoon, Emma drove up to the house where they once lived together. When she got out of the car and saw the familiar front garden, the flower beds that she herself had planted in the spring, her heart sank. Creaking the gate, she entered the porch and knocked. No one opened it, but the door was not locked. Jake stood inside, leaning against the wall as if gathering his thoughts. "Hello," she said, trying not to look him straight in the eyes. "Hello," he answered quietly, looking at her excited face. Suddenly something pinched in her soul, memories of how she returned from work every evening, how they laughed at little things. All this was so long ago and so close at the same time. She entered the living room and noticed that most of the furniture was missing, and there were boxes in the corner. "Are you moving?" she asked. "I'd rather sell the extra," Jake answered. "I don't need this house." Too many memories. Silence hung between them, and Emma decided to speak. "I wanted to say, Jake, I'm sorry. I hurt you very much. And now I see that Logan is not the person with whom I will be happy." He frowned. "Why did you come? To share your disappointment?" She sighed. "I don't know. I suddenly realized that I had made a mistake by choosing the quick money route and turning my back on the person who truly loved me. I wanted to see if we could." "No," Jake said harshly. "We can't." The words that came out of his mouth were as cold as ice. Emma felt her breath catch in her throat. Of course, she understood that it was impossible to return as if nothing had happened. But deep down, she hoped that he would leave her at least a small chance. "Jake, I'm not asking you the impossible. Just, can we try to repair our relationship? Go to a family psychologist, to a priest, I don't know. Didn't you think it was late? He looked at her with sad weariness. I may have loved you, Em, but you trampled on that feeling. And now you come and say that you changed your mind. She wanted to object, but the words got stuck in her throat. Tears appeared in my eyes. I didn't know where else to go, she whispered. I'm sorry. He turned away, walking towards the window. The minute of silence seemed like an eternity. Finally, Jake apparently pulled himself together. I won't shout and cause a scandal because I've already said everything. We file for divorce, the papers are drawn up. You yourself chose a different path, and I don't believe I can trust you again. But I'm ready for you. She began, but Jake interrupted. What? Return to the old house? Forget about your Logan. I don't believe in this anymore. You've come now because he probably didn't live up to your expectations. But that doesn't mean my feelings are in place. Emma dropped her head. She understood the truth of his words, but it was still painful to hear. She had the last spark of hope that love was still alive in him. Okay, she finally said, I see it's late. I should probably leave. Yes, he answered. I think it will be better this way. She slowly moved towards the exit. Stopping on the threshold, Emma turned around. If you suddenly need something, don't fool yourself, Em. I can handle it, Jake said quietly but firmly. And she realized he really didn't want her to help him or appear in his life at all. Having taken the last step, she left the house, feeling the last hope of restoring relations fading away in her soul. A cool wind greeted her outside. The car was parked where she left it. Sitting down in the salon, Emma could not help but burst into tears. Several passers-by took a quick look, but no one approached. It was a typical big city, no rules. Other people's tears don't bother anyone. She sat for some time, unable to start the engine. I thought about what happened. She herself destroyed the family, and now she wanted to return when everything didn't go according to plan. In the end, she acted selfishly, and Jake has the right to refuse. Was there a worm of remorse in her? More than remorse, she felt despair. Finally, wiping away her tears, she drove out onto the road. Where to go now? To Logan? Yes, technically she lived with him, but after talking with Jake, it seemed to her that returning there would mean admitting her final defeat. But she had no other option. Shame, Emma thought, feeling like she was at a dead end. Meanwhile, a heavy silence remained in Jake's house. He fell onto the sofa, trying to breathe evenly. My heart was pounding wildly because this meeting had opened my wounds. Yes, he remained adamant. Yes, he understood that to forgive this meant risking being deceived again. But deep down in his soul, it was bitter to realize. He still loved her, but could not get over the betrayal. This means that they will both have to go down different roads. A week has passed since Emma unsuccessfully tried to get back to Jake. He continued to live in an empty house, sold furniture, and sometimes went to a sports center, where he helped teenagers hone their football skills. At night, he had dreams in which Emma laughed and said, "Everything will be fine," and he woke up in a cold sweat, realizing that she was long gone. During the day, he tried to hold on, but loneliness pressed him. On social networks, everyone I knew had long seen that he was divorced. Some, like Josh, suggested meeting, others did not dare write. But Jake became a mystery man for the town, which also had a special status due to his disability. Marge, his mother, begged him to move in with her at least for a while, but he stubbornly refused. "Thank you, Mom, but I have to do it myself. If I leave now, I will never be able to get back on my feet." Then she suggested that he go to a psychological support group. People who had experienced losses, divorces, and traumas gathered there. Jake initially laughed at the idea, believing that such groups were for weak people. But then, one evening, when he was feeling especially bad, he decided to try. What do I have to lose, he thought. The group met in the basement of a local church on Thursday evenings. When Jake entered, he saw a modestly furnished room, a circle of chairs, and about a dozen people of different ages. Some looked depressed, some looked tense, but all were clearly experiencing their tragedies. The presenter, a woman of about 50, approached them and introduced herself as volunteer psychologist Carol. She invited Jake to take a seat in the circle and feel like he was part of a little family. At first, he was embarrassed. No one knew who he was or why he had come. But after several stories from other participants about accidents, losses of loved ones, betrayals, he dared to tell his own. No details, but enough for people to understand that he is going through a divorce and the aftermath of trauma. Everyone listened carefully, no one judged. After the meeting, one of the participants approached him, a pretty woman with warm brown eyes. Her name was Kate, and she said that she had been going to the group for a month because she had lost her job and was dealing with depression. At first, she also thought it was stupid to share with strangers, but gradually she warmed up to the atmosphere. "I heard your story," Kate said quietly as they walked outside. "I'm sorry, but you said that you helped train the guys? Sounds cool." Jake smiled at the corners of his lips. "Thank you. Yes, this is all that helps to distract yourself." "You know, I have a proposal," she said carefully. "At our local art center, they sometimes show old films. Casablanca is supposed to be playing there tomorrow evening. Do you want some company?" He was at a loss for a moment. On the one hand, he still felt pain after Emma's betrayal. On the other, he could use some distraction. "Okay," he agreed. "Why not?" The next evening, they met at the art center, a small building in which volunteers staged retro screenings of classic films. Kate was wearing a warm jacket and jeans and looked very cozy. At the entrance, she took 2 tickets and handed one to Jake, smiling. "This is my gratitude for your story. Sometimes listening to other people's experiences helps you understand that you are not alone." There were only a few spectators, mostly older couples, and a few film students. Jake and Kate settled into soft armchairs, and while the movie was playing, he felt some kind of calm. Maybe the classic Casablanca about love, which is torn apart by war and circumstances, suited his situation. He caught himself thinking that he was no longer frantically thinking about Emma every second. Instead, he peered at the screen and caught Kate's glances at him in between. After the session, they went outside, where it was already dark. The stars were scattered over the town, the air was fresh, and Jake's soul felt a little lighter. They talked about the film, about the fate of the heroes. Suddenly, Kate laughed. "Sorry if this is strange, but I'm even glad that my crisis brought me to this support group. I met people there to whom I cannot be afraid to speak out." "I understand," Jake nodded. "I used to think that I would feel like a failure there. But it turned out that we are just people with different pains." They reached her car and Kate suggested, "Maybe next time we'll choose some other movie or take a walk in the park." Without any hint, just, "I enjoy talking to you." Jake smiled sincerely. "I will be glad. Thanks for the offer." Returning home to an empty house, he felt that for the first time in a long time he was not so burdened. No, he wasn't looking to start a new relationship, and Kate didn't look like she was looking for a love story. Rather, they were both looking for a friendly shoulder in moments of loneliness. And it was valuable to feel that you are not alone, that there is someone who will listen without moralizing and will not bother you with advice. As Jake went to bed, he realized he was thinking less about Emma. Yes, the feeling of bitterness still returned when he remembered how she stood on the threshold with a pleading look. But now he had a life besides this pain, some meetings, new people, support, and even hints of the opportunity to move on. Over the next few days, he and Kate texted occasionally, sharing little things like how she was looking for a job and going to interviews, and he was helping teenagers at the sports center. Sometimes they met for coffee after the support group and laughed about their own unfortunate stories from the past. Jake was grateful to fate for this ray of light. He was in no hurry to draw conclusions, but he understood that loneliness was no longer so frightening. So time passed, and although the divorce was not yet officially finalized, Jake already felt that life was turning him in a different direction. Perhaps more difficulties awaited him ahead, but now he had at least some new guidelines. And if he once believed that he had lost everything, now he wanted to believe that this was just the beginning of a different path. For Emma, events took a different turn. Ever since Logan issued his ultimatum, quit and leave with me, resistance was brewing in her every day. She didn't want to quit her job at the company where she grew up, much less leave the city. But I saw that Logan was becoming more and more distant and cold. He almost never spent the night at home, citing business trips. The money he promised did not trickle into her account, and she continued to live in his apartment almost out of mercy. One evening, he came very late, and Emma plucked up the courage to ask what was going on. Logan exploded. "Listen, I'm sick of having to report to you. What are you, my wife? No, you just..." He bit his tongue before finishing, but Emma felt anger boiling inside her. "Just who am I, Logan? Say it straight." "Just a pleasant companion who should be able to please a man," he responded harshly, then added, "You know, I'm already sick of your worries. I didn't sign up for family." Emma shuddered. Everything inside screamed that she was mistaken about this man. But she is here, at his home, without a clear future, with a damaged reputation and almost no friends. A couple of days later, Logan announced, "I will have to go to a neighboring state. There is a large order, and I plan to stay there. You'd better look for another place to live for now. I don't want to keep this apartment for someone who's not here working on my project." Emma couldn't believe her ears. "Wait, are you saying that I should vacate the apartment? Where will I go?" "That's your problem," he answered coldly, packing his suitcase. "I helped you, gave you everything you wanted, and now I have other plans." She was speechless. Only a minute later, when he went out into the corridor, she called out, "Logan, I left my husband for you, that's it." He turned around and a grin crossed his face. "Don't play the victim. You made your own choice. Then figure it out for yourself, darling." So she found herself on the street with a suitcase and several boxes of things that she had enough time and energy for. She sadly looked around the night city. "I don't have a home," she realized. "I burned my bridges with Jake. They look at me askance at the office, and I don't have enough money for my own housing." There was an idea to call Sarah, but she had already warned many times that everything could end badly. I didn't want to make myself look insignificant again. Realizing that she had nowhere to sleep, Emma stopped at a budget motel. She took the room for cash since she had a little left from her salary. The motel turned out to be dull, a smoky hallway, a not very clean bed, and from the window a view of the parking lot, where the lights of a police car were flashing. "And this is the price for my choice," she thought, feeling the ground disappearing from under her feet. The next morning, Emma went to the office, hoping that at least she still had her job. But there a new blow awaited her. Mrs. Gibson called her and, speaking with sympathy, explained that due to internal reshuffles, the company could no longer keep Emma in her current position. "Several projects failed, and you were teamed with Logan Reese, and it damaged the firm's reputation. I have to fire you," the boss said quietly. Emma begged to reconsider the decision. "I am not to blame for Logan's actions." But Mrs. Gibson just threw up her hands. In business, the one who is under attack is to blame. So, one day Emma lost both her home and her job. When she left the office, dropping a folder with documents, her eyes were filled with tears. She understood that this was the end of her entire previous life. After spending the day at the motel, Emma tried to call her friends to find out about vacancies. Most just sighed sympathetically, promising to see what can be done. No one was eager to hire a person whose reputation was tarnished the company. There was less and less money left, and renting an apartment without a regular income turned out to be unrealistic. In desperation, she went to a website for temporary jobs and found a dozen advertisements like "waiters wanted," "kitchen assistant needed." Previously, she would have snorted contemptuously, but now she had no choice. In the end, she went to a restaurant that promised quick hiring. The manager took a quick look at her. "Do you have any experience as a waitress?" "No," Emma admitted, "but I learned quickly. I know how to work with clients." The manager sighed. "Okay, there are night shifts. We pay at the rate plus tips. You buy the uniform at your own expense. Agree?" She knew that this was the most difficult time: night shifts, maximum crowds, drunken visitors. But what to do? She nodded. Agree. That same night, she went on shift. I put on an uncomfortable uniform, synthetic material that stuck to my body. The restaurant was average, a lot of visitors, no glamorous atmosphere. Emma, remembering her previous skills in communicating with customers, smiled diligently and took orders. Everything turned into a bunch of small problems. Either someone was dissatisfied with the speed of service, or there was not enough small money in the cash register for change, or a bag of garbage was torn. She worked until exhaustion, and by morning she could barely make it to the motel. On the second night of such a shift, Emma was ready to burst into tears right in the hall. My head was noisy from the constant screams of visitors, my legs hurt, I wanted to sleep. She remembered how recently she was sitting in an expensive restaurant with Logan, enjoying wines, and now her world had turned upside down. Falling, no other word came to mind, looking at my own reflection in the cloudy mirror of the women's locker room. A few days later, she received her first modest payment. The money was ridiculous compared to what Logan had once offered, but at least it allowed him to pay for the motel. Renting an apartment was still a dream because you had to save up for a deposit and pay for a couple of months in advance. She spent her free time wandering through job sites and handing out resumes. Sometimes they received refusals, sometimes they would invite her for an interview, but after learning about her participation in the scandalous Logan Reese project, they politely promised to call her back. So week after week went on. Emma felt like she was banging her head against the wall. She tried to write to Sarah, asking for help, but shame choked her. One evening, she even dialed Sarah's number, but hung up, not daring to say a word. Sarah already had to listen to her excuses when it all started. Sitting in a tiny motel room, lit by a dim light bulb, Emma one day took out of her bag a photograph that, by some miracle, remained with her, a snapshot from her old life with Jake. In the frame, they hug in front of their parents' house and smile. Looking at this photo, she cried, realizing that she had lost everything that was truly valuable. Now she was faced with a huge test: how to live on when you have no financial, moral, or family support. And she was not sure whether she would be able to get out of this fall, or would be forced to slide to the very bottom. Emma continued to work as a waitress in the same restaurant where she got a job as a firefighter. The night shifts were tiring, but she learned to stay on her feet for a long time, quickly navigate orders, and remember the preferences of regular customers. Sometimes the tips came in a little more than she expected. Gradually, she stopped feeling ashamed of this work she needed to survive, and here at least they paid something. Nevertheless, the memory of the past tormented my soul. She wanted to somehow make amends to Jake, even through a letter, because she doubted that he would want to talk to her in person. One day, returning to the motel in the morning, she sat down at a tiny table and scribbled a few lines on paper. "Dear Jake, forgive me for everything I did." But then the words got stuck in her throat. Each time she asked herself, "What can I tell him? I ruined our lives, and now I'm apologizing when I have nothing left." Over the course of 3 days, Emma wrote several drafts, but each time she tore the sheets of paper into shreds, unable to send them. It's too late, she thought. He still won't forgive. Besides, she had no right to barge into his life again, given that he was most likely already moving on. Maybe his friends supported him, or even another woman appeared. The thought pierced her heart, but she accepted that she shouldn't stop him from being happy. So the scraps of letters lay in the trash, and among the empty coffee cups. Sometimes, while drinking cheap tea, Emma looked at them and smiled bitterly. Who knows, maybe this is her only chance to repent, and she can't even make up her mind. One gloomy day, returning along a deserted street to the motel, Emma saw Sarah standing near the entrance, holding a bag of something in her hands. Surprised and delighted, she quickened her pace, although she did not understand why her friend had come. Sarah smiled, albeit awkwardly. "Hello, Em. I learned from friends that you were staying here. I decided to bring you some food, warm clothes. I hope you don't mind." Emma's eyes stung. "Sarah, thank you. I didn't expect it. Sorry, I didn't call. Yes, I understand everything," Sarah answered softly. "I'm not judging you. I just wanted to help." Life is complicated. Emma led her into a tiny room that smelled of tobacco smoke and dampness. Sarah sat down on a shabby chair, looking around at the poor surroundings. Maybe you can still find an opportunity to rent a room or ask me for money. I'm not saying that this is the best way, but you can't live like that. Emma shook her head. No, I don't want to beg from you. I'm already used to this work. I'm saving up little by little. I'll try to find a cheaper apartment. Sarah nodded and silence fell between them. Finally, my friend sighed. I know it's hard for you, but maybe you should try to talk to Jake, at least apologize. It won't take you back to your past, but it might give you a chance to let go of the guilt. Emma slouched. I tried to write to him many times, but every time I hesitated. He made it clear that he didn't need me, and I don't want to get in his way again. Despite this, Emma felt Sarah's words take root in her mind. Maybe we really need to find the strength and say, I'm sorry out loud, not to get everything back, but to let go of the burden that weighs on her every day. In the end, she made up her mind. One night, when I returned from work, I wrote a letter by hand, trying not to go into excuses, but only to express sincere guilt and gratitude for everything that they had experienced together. Having sealed the envelope, she signed Jake's address, which she remembered by heart, deciding to mail it in the morning. However, when morning came, she sat on the bed for 10 minutes, clutching the envelope, and could not move. Finally, making up her mind, she left the motel and headed to the nearest post office kiosk. It was drizzling outside, and Emma wrapped herself in a thin jacket, regretting not taking an umbrella. Her heart was beating inside her. Will I be able to put this letter in the box? She stood in front of the Blue Usp's mailbox, feeling like she was on the verge of an abyss. She held out her hand with the envelope and froze. What if this only makes his wounds worse? A thought flashed. Maybe he's better off without me. Emma struggled with herself for a few seconds, and then with a jerky movement, she removed her hand. Without dropping the letter, she turned and walked back. Arriving at the room, Emma felt that she was shaking from cold and nervous exhaustion. Taking off her wet jacket, she took out the envelope, tore it, and threw it into the trash. No, I can't, she told herself through her tears. At that moment, she realized that her redemption had never been accomplished, and that she probably deserved to suffer even longer because she was incapable of even taking this step. A few more days passed. Emma seemed to have fallen into a routine. She worked at night, slept during the day, ate cheap sandwiches, and occasionally washed her clothes in the shared laundry room. For the first time in her life, she wondered what it meant to be at the very bottom, when there was no one except a couple of kind souls ready to help once, and there was no moral right to ask for much. She increasingly caught herself thinking that if it weren't for pride and guilt, she might have found a way to somehow establish contact with the people she had offended. Time passed. Jake formalized the divorce and sold the house. I earned a small amount with which I could rent a modest apartment in another area, closer to the sports center. He quit his previous volunteer job when he was offered an assistant coaching position with a small but stable salary. This seemed to him an incredible step forward. Now he is not just a suffering disabled person, but a person working for the benefit of teenagers. Together with Kate, he increasingly went to retro shows, sometimes on quiet walks along the embankment. They became close friends. They discussed their problems, laughed at city rumors, and shared plans for the future. One day, Kate mentioned that she dreams of opening a small company organizing events for children if she can find sponsors. Jake, inspired, suggested, I'm also thinking about some kind of business related to sports for teenagers. Maybe we can unite? This is how their idea began to take shape. A small business combining mini sports festivals and entertainment programs for local residents on weekends. They discussed the format for a long time and sought support from local entrepreneurs. It turned out that many were interested in developing leisure activities for young people, and they managed to raise startup capital from several sponsors. Kate took on the creative side, and Jake took on the sports component and administrative issues. They rented a small space, hired a couple of assistants, and began promoting their services through social networks and direct connections with the sheriff, city hall, and schools. For the first time in a long time, Jake felt like he had a purpose that gave him strength. The back pain has not gone away, but he has learned to live with it, following doctors' recommendations and remaining optimistic. Jake's mother, Marge, visited him in his new apartment and was happy to see his son finding himself again. She noticed with a slight smile that he and Kate had a special understanding. He joked, "Mom, we're just business partners and friends." But deep down he knew that something more could be brewing between him and Kate. They were both cautious, having been burned in the past, but warm feelings gradually grew. One day, when their new project successfully passed the first test fair, Kate suggested celebrating the event with dinner at a small family restaurant. Sitting at a wooden table in the light of light bulbs stretched from the ceiling, they spoke so openly about feelings for the first time. "You know, I'm grateful to fate for meeting you," Kate admitted. "You gave me confidence that after a fall I can rise again." Jake smiled, feeling a warm wave in his chest. "And I thought it was you who pulled me out of the abyss. We probably saved each other." While they were sitting, it began to rain outside the window. The lights of the city sparkled in the distance, and although their future was unclear, they were not afraid to look forward. Perhaps this was a new stage for Jake, not to forget the bitter experience, but to learn to live on with the belief that there can be happiness. Meanwhile, Emma, working in a restaurant, began looking for cheaper housing and finally found a room in the basement of a dilapidated house on the outskirts. The owner was ready to rent it out for a modest fee, and for Emma this was a salvation, at least to get rid of the costs of a motel. She told a few people about her life, continuing to withdraw into herself. Sometimes, coming out after her shift, she saw young couples walking, hugging each other and laughing. And then her heart sank. Everything could have been different if I had not betrayed Jake. On one of the rare weekends when the restaurant closed early, Emma wandered to the bus stop and suddenly saw familiar faces among the passers-by: Josh and a couple of Jake's friends from college. They noticed her too, but hesitated awkwardly, not knowing how to react. Finally, Josh took a step forward. "Emma, hi. I heard you're having a hard time right now. If anything, please contact me. We all remember you as a normal girl." She squeezed out with difficulty. "Thank you, Josh. I have everything. More or less. I hope Jake is doing well." "Yes, everything has worked out for him," he nodded, looking at her with understanding. "He's doing great, he's busy with his project now, and his personal life seems to be getting better." Emma's heart trembled. "Is your personal life getting better?" she repeated to herself. A mixed feeling of jealousy and relief ran through her. She said out loud, "It's good to hear. Tell him. Okay, forget it." Josh shook his head. "In any case, if you suddenly need something, know that not everyone is against you." As he walked away, Emma felt tears welling up in her eyes. She was glad that Jake was doing well, but she realized that he was out of her life forever. And that's right. They were on different paths now, and she should stop mourning the past and focus on getting out of her hole. Several months have passed. Emma was able to save some money and got a more decent job in a cafe under the guidance of her friend Sarah. The conditions were a little better, the schedule was more stable, and this allowed Emma to slowly get back on her feet. She still lived in a cheap room, but she already dreamed of renting a studio and maybe returning to school to start her career again. One day, when she was returning from work by bus, she saw a sign in a window on one of the streets. "Sports and Entertainment Center. Organization of events. We invite volunteers and sponsors." Below were two names, and one of them was Jake Spencer. Emma froze, watching the advertisement flash past the window. So he finally realized his dream. Warm sadness pierced her heart. He was able, despite disability and betrayal, to find a new business and a new life. For a moment, she wanted to get off at the nearest stop and go there, just to watch, maybe from afar to see how he worked, whether he was happy. But she knew that her appearance there would be inappropriate. She doesn't want to hurt him again, remind him of herself. Sighing, she remained where she was, and the bus rolled on. Thus, their paths finally diverged. Jake continued to develop his business with Kate, feeling that he was getting closer to her. They rented an office together, held events, and even thought about opening a summer camp for teenagers. From time to time, he remembered the past, but without that pain, rather, as an important lesson that strengthened him. Emma, for her part, gradually gained at least some kind of stability, learned to earn money, and began to smile sometimes, thinking that she still had a chance to build an honest, if not luxurious life. She still kept the photograph from their common past, but she no longer clutched it with tears in her eyes. Now it was a sign that she once loved and was loved, even if it all ended tragically. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.